Welcome to Soul Stories, where every tale touches the heart and inspires the soul. Daniel was only 23, but life had already taught him the weight of struggle. A scholarship student at a small community college, he juggled part-time jobs, skipped meals to save money, and lived in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and flickering lights. His dreams of becoming an architect were fading fast under the shadow of student loans and unpaid bills. Every evening, after finishing his shift at the diner, Daniel volunteered at a local senior center, not because he had spare time, but because it gave him peace. Listening to the stories of the elderly made him feel less alone. That's where he met Eleanor Whitmore. Eleanor was 71, elegant, graceful, and surprisingly full of laughter for someone who had seen so much of life. She was a widow of a real estate tycoon and had more wealth than Daniel could even imagine. But she didn't carry herself like a millionaire. She wore simple dresses, read poetry, and enjoyed sketching by the window. Their first conversation started over spilled tea. Daniel had accidentally bumped into her while rushing with a tray of snacks. Instead of scolding him, Eleanor burst into laughter and said, "You remind me of my late husband, always in a hurry, always dropping things." Daniel apologized nervously, but she waved it off and invited him to sit. That day turned into a habit. Every time he volunteered, Eleanor waited for him, eager to talk, to listen, to share her thoughts about books, art, and life. Daniel, who had never known real kindness from anyone outside his family, felt drawn to her warmth. She admired his sincerity and sense of humor. He admired her wisdom and calm. Rumors began to spread around the center that the poor student had charmed the rich widow. Daniel ignored them. To him, Eleanor wasn't a bank account. She was a friend, perhaps the only one who saw value in him beyond his financial status. But one evening, after a quiet dinner at her mansion, Eleanor looked at him and said softly, "Daniel, I know how hard you've been working. You deserve peace, not struggle." Then she asked something that froze him completely. "Will you marry me?" Daniel's mind spun. Marriage? To a woman nearly 50 years older? It sounded insane, and yet it also sounded like salvation. He hesitated, his conscience wrestling with temptation. After a sleepless night and a dozen unanswered questions, Daniel made his choice. He said yes, and that single word would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The wedding day arrived faster than Daniel could process. Only a month had passed since Eleanor's proposal, and yet here he was, standing in front of a full-length mirror in a crisp black suit, adjusting his tie with trembling hands. The reflection staring back at him didn't look like the same struggling student who used to skip dinner to pay rent. He looked composed, sharp, but somewhere deep inside, still uncertain. Eleanor had insisted on keeping the ceremony small and private. "Love doesn't need an audience," she had said with a gentle smile. The event was held in her rose garden, a breathtaking place filled with the scent of lilies and lavender, with white chairs lined neatly under the golden afternoon sun. A soft piano melody played as the guests arrived, a mix of her old friends, business partners, and a few of Daniel's classmates who couldn't quite believe what they were witnessing. As he stood at the altar, Daniel could feel their eyes piercing into him, whispering, judging, wondering what the young man was after. "Gold digger," someone muttered under their breath. Daniel pretended not to hear, but the words cut deep. Then Eleanor appeared, dressed in an ivory gown with a pearl necklace glimmering against her skin. She looked radiant, not like a 71-year-old woman, but like someone reborn. When she took Daniel's hand, all the noise faded. There was something in her touch, steady, reassuring, almost motherly, that calmed his trembling heart. When the priest asked if he would take her as his lawful wife, Daniel hesitated for the briefest second. Then he met her eyes, saw the quiet kindness there, and whispered, "I do." Eleanor smiled, tears glistening in her eyes as she repeated the same words. When they kissed, polite applause filled the air. Some guests smiled, others looked away. But at that moment, Daniel felt an unfamiliar peace. That evening, they shared their first meal as husband and wife under fairy lights in the garden. Eleanor laughed softly at his awkwardness, teasing him like a teenager on his first date. She promised to take care of him, not with money but with respect and trust. Daniel, touched by her sincerity, vowed to stay loyal, to protect her, and to be honest in return. For the first time in years, he thought maybe happiness wasn't a fantasy. Maybe, just maybe, he had made the right choice. But as the night ended and the lights dimmed, Daniel had no idea that the real test of his heart was only a week away. A week had passed since the wedding, 7 quiet, almost dreamlike days. Daniel was still adjusting to his new reality. No more double shifts, no more overdue rent notices, no more counting coins for dinner. For the first time in years, he could breathe. Eleanor was gentle and patient, treating him not like a husband of convenience, but as a true companion. Every morning she made him tea and asked about his dreams. Every evening they walked together in the garden, where she told him stories about her youth, about the empire she and her late husband had built from nothing. Daniel listened fascinated. Still, a small part of him, the part that had struggled for survival for so long, kept wondering when she would officially share her wealth with him. That moment, he thought, finally came on the 7th day. "Daniel," Eleanor said that morning with her usual calm smile, "I need you to come with me to my lawyer's office. There are some papers I'd like you to sign." His heart skipped. Papers, lawyer. It had to be about inheritance, maybe a transfer of property or a joint account. He tried to stay humble, but excitement bubbled quietly inside him. This was it, the start of a new life. The office was modern and quiet, the kind of place that smelled of old money and polished wood. The lawyer, a gray-haired man in a sharp suit, greeted them with a nod. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "please have a seat." Daniel waited, his palms sweaty, his thoughts racing. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. "Here it is," he said. Daniel opened it eagerly, but what he saw made his smile vanish. It wasn't an inheritance document. It was a legal declaration of asset donation, stating that Eleanor Whitmore had transferred all her wealth, estates, and bank holdings to a children's orphanage foundation under her name. Everything gone. He turned to Eleanor, stunned. "Eleanor, what is this?" She looked at him with gentle eyes. "It's the truth," she said softly. "I've given it all away. I kept only a small apartment and my art supplies. I wanted to see—" She paused, her voice trembling. "If love could exist without money." Daniel's throat went dry. His heart pounded in disbelief, anger, and confusion all at once. The walls of security he had just started to build crumbled in an instant. He realized then, this was never about wealth. It was about him, about who he truly was when the money disappeared. And now Eleanor was waiting for his answer, not with words, but with silence. Daniel sat frozen in the lawyer's office, his mind blank. The sound of the ticking clock filled the silence, each second striking like a hammer against his chest. Eleanor's words echoed in his head. "I wanted to see if love could exist without money." For a long moment he couldn't speak. His dreams of wealth, comfort, and a carefree life shattered before his eyes. Every reason he had once convinced himself this marriage made sense, gone in an instant. He looked at Eleanor. She sat there, calm and composed, her wrinkled hands folded neatly in her lap. There was no guilt in her expression, no cruelty, only a quiet sadness, like someone who had been disappointed too many times before. Finally, Daniel whispered, his voice trembling, "So, it was all a test?" Eleanor nodded gently. "Not to hurt you, Daniel, to understand you. People have loved my money all my life, but never me. I needed to know what kind of man you truly are." Her words pierced deeper than any insult could. Daniel turned away, his thoughts spinning. Part of him wanted to walk out, to feel angry, betrayed, even humiliated. But another part, deeper and quieter, refused to move. He remembered the laughter they had shared, the warmth in her eyes when she talked about art, the way she listened to him when no one else cared. None of that had anything to do with money, he realized, with a sharp pang of shame that somewhere along the way, he had truly come to care for her, not for her wealth, but for her soul. Eleanor stood and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You can leave if you wish," she said softly. "I'll understand." Daniel looked up at her, frail, wise, and smiling as if she already knew his decision. Slowly, he reached for her hand. "No," he said quietly, "I'm not going anywhere." A tear slipped down her cheek. For the first time, she looked not like a wealthy widow or a test maker, but like a woman who had finally found peace. In the months that followed, They moved into her modest apartment overlooking a quiet park. They lived simply, painting, reading, and walking together each evening. People whispered that Daniel had lost everything, but he knew better. He had gained something far more valuable: truth. Because love, tested by loss, doesn't break. It reveals who we truly are.